Eyewitness News presents NewsMakers, winner of the Pennsylvania Association of Broadcasting Award for Excellence in Public Affairs Programming, with your hosts, Jayne Ann Bugda and Andy Mehalshick.
Hello and welcome to NewsMakers. I'm Jayne Ann Bugda along with Andy Mehalshick. Today we are focusing on losing a loved one to a drug overdose. We'll take a look at the support that's available to families and the help that's available for those still battling an addiction. I'll introduce you to our guests, and our discussion will begin when this edition of NewsMakers returns right after this. Welcome back to NewsMakers. I'm Jayne Ann Bugda along with Andy Mehalshick. Every overdose is someone's child, and today we are sharing stories of families who have lost loved ones to drug addiction. We are joined by Coolbaugh, who lost a son, Bernadette Gately, who lost a daughter and a granddaughter, and joining us in our conversation, Jason Harlen, the Executive Director of Wyoming Valley Alcohol and Drug Services. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you for sharing your stories on this very important topic. And Jason, always thank you for offering your expertise. We're going to start, Jason, with you by talking about addiction, and addiction really is not one person's disease, but it's a family disease. Explain that.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Many people are under the impression that addiction affects that individual person. That's absolutely false. We need to realize that it really is a ripple effect. I can tell you, I've been affected, by addiction within family, friends, as all of us probably have been here around the table, but it affects so many things, physical issues, emotional issues for the family, financial issues, employment issues. So it does, it affects everybody, not only just that individual. So it is a family disease, absolutely.
And when you're battling a disease, you need family support, but then sadly, sometimes they lose the battle. Just as Carol and Bernadette are here today to tell us about their stories. So, it's an emotional story, and many people watching today are probably out there dealing with the same, as you said, every one of us lives have been touched somehow by addiction. So, Carol, share a little bit about the story of your son, Eric.
Well, my son was pretty much a normal kid, did things normal kids do, played sports, had sleepovers, played Nintendo, Boy Scouts, and then at 11 he started to experiment with cigarettes and alcohol, and that quickly progressed to marijuana and then heroin. He was in his first rehab at 15.
And you support a loved one and you're there for them, and what happened?
Well, it is a family disease, that is for sure, and it does affect everybody in the family, so there was a lot of dynamics that went on. A lot of ups and downs. He was in and out of rehab many times. He was in jail. He was out of state in rehab, halfway houses, all of it. And it's a roller coaster ride. When they're in there and they're doing well, you think everybody's happy and you're looking positive, and then they relapse and everything comes crashing down again.
Carol, you were saying there are a lot of ups and downs, peaks and valleys. Was there a point where you thought progress was being made, he was turning the corner, that you might be able to beat this addiction?
Well, he passed away in January, and that fall he had his first apartment that he had on his own. He had a job he liked, and I thought he was doing really well, and then he lost the job. Through no fault of his own for once. It was downsizing, and so that just a ripple effect. Then he lost his apartment and he relapsed. And
Bernadette, you also lost a granddaughter and a daughter.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about your loss.
Well, my daughter, a little bit different than Carol's son. She didn't start doing drugs till she was approximately 33 years old. She had a little boy, a 3-year-old boy, that drowned, and she never recovered from that, and I think her way of escape was heroin. That continued on and off for 10 years. She was in and out of rehabs, in and out of jail for drug-related crimes such as petty theft. She actually was clean for almost 2 years off of heroin. The dysfunction, as we talked about in the family of an addict, her 3 children, especially Grace, was affected the most. And at 13, she started to not do heroin, but very similar to Carol's story, marijuana, drinking, Benadryl. She was in her first rehab at 13. By 15, she had been in 3 rehabs. She was actually, had just gotten out of the rehab possibly 6 weeks before that, and I felt that the rehab she was in, the only thing she learned was a lot older girls who taught her a lot of different things. She hooked up with a girl after she was out of rehab. She was doing really good in school. This girl picked her up with a 27-year-old man from Russia, took them to a hotel in Upper Darby, and he was videotaped dragging my granddaughter's body down the steps, and the maid saw it and called the police. Nothing has happened to him. He escaped to Moscow, and they told me that they could only get him on 2 misdemeanors. So it was very upsetting to me. After she died, 3 days after she was buried, my daughter picked up heroin and overdosed that night. So within a 2-week period, I lost both of them. It's just horrific.
And Bernadette, how recent was this? I know before...
This just happened October of 2017.
Of last year.
Yes, it hasn't even been 9 months.
And you started a group, but how can you... I guess a lot of people, and even though we do so many reports on this tragedy, the opioid epidemic and overdoses, how can you move on, and how are you able to muster that, for both of you, for sure, to get the energy to do this?
I feel like I'm still in this grieving period, but I want to work with NIH. I've worked with them before, and I really feel we have to do something for adolescents because whatever we're doing isn't working, and they're dying. And I'd like to apply for a grant, do some research. There has been no research done in the United States. It's all been done over in Europe because I did a literature review. And I think we have to get to the core of this. I think this fentanyl is the issue right now. It's so dangerous. That's the only thing they found in my granddaughter's body was fentanyl. She had no track marks. She never had track marks. One time she snorted it. It's deadly. And I don't know the answer to that, but at a national level, there has to be such a humongous crackdown on this fentanyl because we see what's happening in Luzerne County all over the United States. We're going to lose a generation of people, and we're going to wake up and say, this was an atrocity. Mm-hmm. What took us so long? Mm-hmm. What took us so long?
And Jason, you know, at what age are you seeing, you know, both their children started granddaughter and Eric started very young. What age are you seeing people starting to experiment?
We've seen kids as young as 7 years old, if I'm being honest with you.
That's just like amazing.
7. I mean, just within our organization, average age of experimentation is 11, 12 years old. And that's down heavily from the last few years. Just a few years ago it was 14 years old. So, you know, a lot of kids this day and age think they're invincible. You know, as Bernadette said, you know, there's kids who wake up, they think they try something, and they think they're invincible. Next thing you know, they're dead. So it's very sad and depressing.
And what are you seeing, if you know, how are they gaining access to these drugs, whether it be heroin or opioids? How are they gaining access? And you would think with all of the coverage and public awareness, at least what I've seen, shouldn't this not be happening because the awareness is out there? Mm-hmm. You would think.
Yeah, there's a lot of good awareness out there. However, if a human being wants to get something, they'll get it. You know, whether it be the internet, whether it be a friend, whether it be Joe Schmo down the street, you know. So if somebody wants something, they're going to get it. So the accessibility is there. Technology is just absolutely amazing, but it's absolutely a downfall as well, too.
And why are they saying they need it? In other words, if they want to get this, is it peer pressure? Is it the media culture? Is it the fast-paced, I want to try something daring?
I think it's everything you just said. You know, social media is an amazing thing, but it's also a negative thing as well too. You see bullying on there, you see drug use on there glorified. It's absolutely astonishing. You know, as human beings, the first thing we want to do is get rid of pain. You know, whether it be, now when I say pain, depression, sadness, physical pain. So that's what drugs do. They take away pain. At least that's what people think they do in the beginning, but in the end, that's not the result.
And you know, and Eric was a good-looking young man. Did he have influence with friends that maybe that, or was it just something that in his life that he just, you think it was his personality, or?
I think it's something that, you know, he had other friends that he was using with, but they didn't have that addictive that addictive gene. They moved on. He didn't. He ended up dropping out of school. They graduated, they went to college, they have families, they're married, you know. They didn't have that gene.
And the addiction is so strong, and a lot of people say, oh, you know, you can go into rehab, and it's not that easy.
And I think they think that I'm just going to party for a while, I'm going to have a good time, and I'll be able to quit when I want to. When I want to, I'll be able to quit. They don't realize what they're getting into. They really don't, especially once they start the hardest, the opiates.
And I think with the adolescents that are starting, the research shows that 55 to 60 have dual diagnosed. They have mental health issues that aren't being addressed. They have anxiety, they have bipolar, they have a lot of family issues, being raised by a mother that was on heroin, not that Carol was. And as far as you were saying about getting the drugs, you can drive 90 miles. I worked at Temple University. It's an open air market. And people walk up and down and sell the drugs, and you're not allowed to arrest them because only in Philadelphia narcotics officers can do that. So it's almost like going to a farmer's market, but it's heroin everywhere.
And you know, it's sad because I guess as a mom and as a grandmom, you are looking at addiction differently than somebody else, because you're looking at, that's your son, that's your daughter.
We're looking at the person that's there before the drugs. You know, and other people just look at them with the drug.
Right, and a lot of people just, I guess they kind of discount the person thinking, oh, just another drug addict. They don't realize that's someone's child. Somebody raised that person.
Yeah, somebody loves them.
This was the little ballerina, the little soccer player, just like anybody else's child.
Now, you also work with a group called GRASP, and that helps people who have lost someone to an overdose. Tell us a little bit about that and how that has helped. It helped you a little bit get through the passing.
Well, it is a nationwide group, and I found it online, and I decided to start a local chapter here. And after Eric passed away, I did spend a couple years in therapy and going to other grief counseling groups, but it's hard. You have a whole different life even before they died. There's a lot of chaos, a lot of craziness that went on. And not only did you lose your child, but sometimes even prior to that, you've lost family members because they don't want anything to do with you because of your child. They've lost friends that quit supporting you. So you have had a lot of losses. You may have lost things like your finances because you've been helping them. You know, so there's a lot to craziness that went on before their death, and then you have to deal with the death also. So it's a unique experience.
Did you both ever feel as if, whether it be family or friends, that they were somehow blaming you or others in the family that, why didn't you stop this? Why didn't you step in? Or obviously they're not doing enough. Did you? Is that part of the challenge also, knowing that you were doing what you could?
Not only is the person using the drugs judged, the family's judged also, because just like you said, they think that, you know, must have been something wrong with the way they were raised.
And do you think that perception is changing now because of public awareness and realizing it's not just certain families from certain neighborhoods or certain economic backgrounds, it's everybody? Is that changing?
After my granddaughter died the following Monday, a very prominent surgeon, open heart cardiothoracic surgeon that I worked with, whose son went to top-notch high schools, private college, died that Monday of a heroin overdose. But some people don't want to admit it. Everything on Facebook, they won't, you know, Silence is a very dangerous thing. I think if more people that come out with this, the more awareness there's going to be. This isn't the heroin that was in the 70s in Harlem. This is everywhere. You know, it's in colleges, it's everywhere.
And Jason, we are dealing with a different type of drugs than we were, you know, when we start talking, you know, 20 years ago about drugs. These drugs are very, very potent.
Yeah, you're dancing with the devil right now in 2018. A lot of this stuff is synthetic. It's man-made. We don't know what's in it. The fentanyl, for example, that's hundreds of times stronger than heroin. And heroin alone is deadly. So it's Russian roulette. That's what this comes down to. People do not know what they are putting into their body. Jason,
I would imagine that it's very easy to be pessimistic and say there's no hope. What are you seeing from your perspective on of treatment and counseling? Is there a way out? And if there is, does the person have to invest in it? They've got to want to be helped, or you can't force it upon them?
Yeah, you can't force somebody into treatment right now. I know there's laws being put on the floor to force somebody into treatment, but in the end, in most cases, you know, you have to want the help. It's an investment. I like that word that you used, because it is a lifelong investment. The good news is people are getting better. There's no question about that. You know, I don't think there's enough focus on the people getting better. We have people employed at our agency that are over 10 years sober, and they're doing a fantastic job by giving back. So people are getting better, I promise you.
Well, we are going to take a quick break, and when we return, we're going to talk about how to begin the conversation with your children about drug addiction. You're watching NewsMakers. You can find information on today's show on pahomepage.com or under the NewsMakers link. Again, you're watching NewsMakers. We're a proud recipient of 3 Pennsylvania Association Awards for Excellence in Public Affairs Programming, and we'll be back right after this.
And welcome back to Eyewitness NewsMakers. Andy Mehalshick, Jayne Ann Bugda. We have our special guest today, folks and families who have been dealing with drug addiction, tragic, lost loved ones from addiction, drug overdoses, and of course Jason, a counseling expert, treatment addiction expert. Let me just throw this question out. How does a family, I'm sure families are watching right now and they're going through it or know someone who's going through it, a family in a situation. How do you begin the discussion within the family to get help? Because as Bernadette and Carol were talking about, it could be a very volatile situation. But how do you open that discussion? How did you start your discussion with your son or your daughter?
Well, I think initially we don't want to believe it, and we're in some type of denial, and it really does come down to a tough love approach, especially with my daughter. She was being put in jail a lot, and actually a lot of the outcomes of people that do well, it is because of going to jail, and that is when she cleaned her act up. But I would send her money on the books and do this, and then I had to say, no, I can't do that. You know, I can't enable this. This isn't right, which was really, really hard for me to do. And being the grandmother, it was even worse, because when Grace would act out, my daughter, new in sobriety, didn't know how to handle it, so she'd say, I'm sending you to Grammy's, and then I'd take her to have her hair done, and she'd come home and say, well, you thought you punished me, but you didn't. And I just, with my granddaughter, it was so hard for me to accept, because she was so young, that she was going to end up in this kind of life. So I think we have to, you know, be really realistic and talk, right? This is a new generation. We have to start talking very young to these kids. This is, you know, this is out there. This could happen, which in retrospect I didn't do.
Yeah, I don't think I did either. When we found some paraphernalia in Eric's room is when I think we had our first discussion with them, and we did get him into rehab. And you know, I wasn't very educated on it, and that would be my advice to anybody. If you're going to talk to your children, you need to educate yourself first and know what you're talking about and understand, you know, what these drugs do and how easy they are to be accessible to them.
I've heard the phrase in recent months that a family cannot love the problem away.
No.
You want normalcy. You say, for example, you found paraphernalia, or you knew your daughter was involved in it, and it's almost like a facade. You had the family dinner, you had the Christmas, and everything seems okay, and you love them, you hug them, and you think that's okay. But what you're saying, Bernadette, you have to be brutally honest and say, here are the facts. I can't hug it away. We can't love it away, and and we can't ignore it. You got to face it head on, and that's painful.
Well, that's what I eventually did, and then of course I heard it from my sisters, and that I wasn't being sympathetic, and it was hard on Desiree. She lost the son. I said, but that was 10 years ago, and she has 3 other children, and I had to take that really tough love approach because, and it's hard because you love your children and you want the best for them.
And what should parents? When should they begin talking, and what should they be looking for their children?
I don't think there's a minimum age. I really don't. I mean, obviously, you're going to talk a little differently to a 6 or 7-year-old than you are an 8, 9, 10-year-old. But Bernadette's correct. We need to make sure we intervene early. I have so many parents come in and say, well, I don't want my son or daughter exposed to this. They're already exposed to it. It's too late at that point. So, be upfront. Tough love is important. So I don't think there's a minimum age. I just think it needs to be handled delicately with different age ranges.
And Bernadette, you hit the key point before, because we all know family members and friends who are coping with this now, or dealing with it, or struggling with it. How do you cut somebody off as a mom or a grandmother? When I say cut them off, saying, I can't finance this anymore. You've got to get help. We can't do this anymore. That's got to be something that people can't even comprehend.
It's very hard. And then, especially when you have children involved, I mean, I was able to cut off my daughter, but then I would keep driving up here and paying for everything for the kids because you don't want them to suffer. And they were young when all of this started. They were 5, 6, 7. There's a fine line between tough love and love. So I haven't,
And sometimes your love may get in the way of maybe helping them. Is that fair to say?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I think too what's important, I could tell you we do counseling every day at the agency, treatment, and I can sit with the best of people that I don't know, but if it's a family member or friend, I'm ineffective. That's a personal attachment right there, so there has to be that separation.
The one thing that I found with heroin was my daughter was on it for quite a while before I knew. Unlike when somebody's drinking, you can smell it, they're falling. The heroin addict can be very subtle. I found that there were many times that my daughter was on it in retrospect and I had no idea. No idea.
So the key is to educate yourself as a parent, as a loved one, as a spouse, because there's husbands and wives probably going through this right now, and even children who maybe have a parent who may be, with our opioid addictions, to know what's going on. And I know we also we look at senior citizens who are also, that's a new generation, a new wave of addiction too that we're also looking at. We have about 3.5 minutes left. What do you say, Carol and Bernadette, to people out there who are going through what you're going through right now? What do you tell them?
Well, they're not alone, and there are support groups out there for you, and everybody grieves differently, and you shouldn't let anybody tell you how to grieve. And there's waves. It comes and it goes, and it does get easier, but it never goes away.
And I just feel that if you suspect this, the best thing is to try to get with other family members who have gone through it. Don't isolate and hide it, because just sharing with Carol gives me relief.
And what do you say to family members who may have a question? And now we've been showing the Wyoming Valley Drug and Alcohol and Drug Services number, but we'll also have other numbers on our website, pahomepage.com, for people who are around the area. But if someone calls you and says, I suspect something, what do you tell them?
We basically direct them, hey, let's talk about symptoms, let's talk about signs, what's the behavior you're experiencing, tell us a little bit about what's happened in the last couple months or couple days, whatever it might be. We basically, show them, this is available, this is what you can do, this is what you can't do. So there's a lot of help out there, but it's got to be good qualitative help, because there's a lot of treatment out there that's not qualitative, and that's the key. So I plead to anybody out there, If you know somebody, if you have a family member who needs help, do what you need to do. If they're on the side of a ledge of a building, they were going to jump, you're going to grab them. That's what you need to do with this as well, too.
One quick question. I'm sure there are folks out there right now who are addicted to heroin, opioids, and they're watching this and maybe their family is not aware yet. What do you want to tell those folks out there? What should they do?
Well, I personally think that they should tell someone, because everybody, they do have people that love them. And I think that they would appreciate that they would come forward and tell them, and they would help them, I'm sure.
Don't be ashamed.
Right.
I agree. I wish somebody had told me, and it was actually my daughter's husband who, at the end, you know, sort of told on her all, but it was kept from me. Don't keep it from the people that love them. If you're a friend, a neighbor, a girlfriend, and your girlfriend's on heroin, tell the parents.
Yeah. And if you're not comfortable with telling a parent, then tell someone else. There's other people. Tell your teacher. Tell,
right.
You know.
And try to get help. And if someone needs support, we want to remind everyone that we have the information for GRASP on pahomepage.com. We have information for drug rehabilitation and other sites for help, and we also have information on a foundation for Carol's son Eric. Carol, Bernadette, Jason, we want to thank you for joining us today for Newsmakers. We have information for anyone watching the show, for everyone behind the scenes, and Andy Mehalshick. I'm Jayne Ann Bugda. Thank you so much for making Newsmakers part of your day. We'll talk again next time.
Thank you.